An international driver is returning to NASCAR, and we might have a different lead announcer in the booth for the NBC races this year, at least post-Olympics. But yes, let's talk about Kamui Kobayashi first. Kamui Kobayashi made his NASCAR Cup Series debut last August at the Indianapolis Road Course. Finished 33rd in that race, but I don't think that really represented his speed. I think he was involved in a couple of spins, couple of incidents. But ultimately, 33rd was the result. We have seen the number 67 car, which is the car he will be driving once again for 23XI Racing. It is their third car. It's kind of like their version of Trackhouse's Project 91. But we have seen Travis Pastrana in it back in the 2023 Daytona 500. And then, as I said, Kamui Kobayashi was in it last fall or last summer, I guess, at Indianapolis. But here's what 23XI said. They said, "He's back, winking face emoji." Kamui Kobayashi rejoins 23XI Racing for his second career NASCAR Cup Series start as he takes on COTA with teammates Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick. And then they posted this little graphic, Austin, the three drivers. And yeah, Kamui Kobayashi, he's going to be in a competitive car. 23XI Racing is actually the defending winner of this race. Tyler Reddick won it last year. I think he dominated this race, really, but he did indeed win it. So we'll see how Kamui Kobayashi does. I'm genuinely interested to see how he does because, once again, I feel like that 33rd place finish just was not a great representation of how he actually did. Just because he was involved in a few incidents. So I'm hoping to see him have a clean race at COTA in about a week and a half here. I'm excited to see how he does. Excited to see what he can do in that car. Once again, it's a competitive car, and if he can bring some speed to it, if he can stay clean, I'm curious to see how he can do, whether it's, top 20, top 15, or maybe, even a top 10. But it'll be interesting. It'll be fun. But Kamui Kobayashi is back in the NASCAR Cup Series, the former F1 driver, and I think he's still in WEC. He's back. He is back in the NASCAR Cup Series for at least one start in 2024. Well, we knew that there would be at least one change with the NBC booth. We knew that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was going to be leaving. He would be going to Amazon and Warner Brothers. That has already been reported on for weeks now, so we don't need to revisit that. But the question was, were they going to add someone to the booth, or were they just going to keep Letarte, Allen, and Burton? Well, it appears that they may change that actual lineup. It seems that Rick Allen will call the NBC races from mid-June, which is when NBC takes over in 2024, up until the Olympic break in the late summer, late July, early August. And then after that Olympic break, which is a 2-week off period, by the way, this year, we will see Leigh Diffey in the NBC booth. I'm really excited about this move because, look, I feel like I'm one of the few who actually likes Rick Allen. I think he's made some great calls. That 7th championship for Jimmy Johnson, that call was amazing. Yes, he messes up every once in a while, but so does every other commentator. So does every other human being. We mess up as human beings. But I personally like him. I hope, if he's not at NBC in the future, if he goes somewhere else, I hope he leads a lead role somewhere. If he goes to Amazon, Warner Brothers, I'm curious to see where he ends up going, or if he, what he ends up doing. But Leigh Diffey is an amazing play-by-play commentator. He's done IndyCar for a number of years now. He even did a few NASCAR Cup Series races back in 2017, and he is amazing. I remember that call that he had of 2017 Michigan. Larson started 4th or 3rd. He started on the second row, and on the restart, he split the middle, was in the lead by turn 1, turn 2, wherever it was, and, Leigh Diffey's like, oh my God, he had a blinding restart. And Leigh Diffey, he brings a lot of excitement to the booth. He does a great job calling races. I mean, all of his Indianapolis 500 calls have been great. Last year's with Joseph Newgarden winning was amazing. Saying, is this when the pain ends? Because Newgarden had never won it. But it's a very exciting time. It does say, though, because NBC does carry some of the Xfinity races this year through the fall, it says that Rick Allen will continue to do the Xfinity series in this report. But I'm curious to see what the long-term plan is for NBC. If this is like a transition, we go from Rick Allen in June through July, And then after the Olympic break, we pick back up and Leigh Diffey's in the role, if that's like the transition for Leigh Diffey to take over. Because, of course, that new media rights deal hits in 2025. NBC will have the last 14 races of the season. So I'm curious to see if Leigh Diffey becomes the guy at NBC, the lead commentator, the play-by-play guy. And if so, I will be very excited for it. I've loved listening to him in the booth. I think he's a great commentator. And then as for Rick Allen, yeah, I hope he gets to call races somewhere, whether, it's NASCAR or elsewhere. I still think he does a good job. I know some people disagree with me, but I do like Rick Allen. But as for Leigh Diffey, I love Leigh Diffey. I think he does a great job. He can bring a lot to a NASCAR booth. As for other news, those were the two big news stories. Kamui Kobayashi going to 23-11 for a second start. Leigh Diffey taking over the NBC role. But as for small news, Chris Buescher's pit crew members, they were issued a suspension after the Vegas race, but RFK appealed it. But the whole reason they appealed it is so that they could push it back a week and they could, get a couple of pit guys in order, in line, so that they could serve the 2-race suspension. So really it was just delaying the inevitable. RFK knew they weren't going to win the appeal, so they withdrew the appeal. Buescher's 2 pit crew members will be suspended for this week at Bristol and next week at COTA due to that tire failure, or that loose wheel, whatever you want to call it, at Bristol, or at Vegas, sorry. But other than that, no big news, nothing crazy here. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Later today, I want to do a video. The big topic this week has been horsepower. Should NASCAR add more horsepower for the short tracks and stuff? It's a hot topic. I want to talk about it again. We talked about it a little bit last week, but I do want to touch on it again just because it is such a hot topic. And then Kyle Larson said some comments on the horsepower, talking about what Hendrick Motorsports, some people at Hendrick Motorsports told him. So ultimately, I just think we should talk about it again. So I'll put that video up later this afternoon. Everything else in the future, we got a cup race at Bristol this weekend, and then COTA in 2 weeks. But obviously this weekend's focus is at Bristol. So thanks for watching this again. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys later this afternoon to talk about horsepower.